everyone, welcome back. In this particular video, we will be discussing the problem Fizzbuzz. What we are given is a program. What we have to write is a program that outputs the string representation of numbers from 1 to n. That is, all the numbers from 1 to n should be printed in a string kind of manner. But what is the scenario or what is the constraint? Because if it is just printing 1 to n in numbers, then you can easily do it. The scenario is or multiples of 3, that is 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on, you should print fizz instead of the number itself. Similarly, for the multiples of 5, you should print buzz instead of the number itself. That is, instead of 3, 6, 9, and so on, you will have to print fizz instead of 3, 6, 9 itself. And instead of 5, 10, and so on, you will have to print buzz. But there is one more very important criteria, that for the numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, they should be having Fizzbuzz getting printed, not 3 or not 5, or actually not fizz, not only buzz, and not also the number itself. And of course, if nothing is mentioned for the numbers which are neither multiples of 3 nor multiples of 5, then they will be printed as it is, that is a number itself. You can also take an example input to understand the problem statement. If input is 15, that is, we have to print first 15 natural numbers from 1 to 15, but according to the constraints, what will be the output? 1. Why? Because 1 is neither a multiple of 3 nor a multiple of 5. 2 is also not a multiple of 3, not a multiple of 5. So same numbers will get printed, 1 and 2. But when it comes to 3, fizz will be printed because 3 is only a multiple of 3, not a multiple of 5. What about 4? Neither 3 nor 5. What about 5? It will be a multiple of only 5, not 3. So buzz is printed. What about 6? Only a multiple of 3. 7, neither. 8, neither multiple of, you can say multiple of 3 or multiple of 5. But what about 9? Only 3. What about 10? It is only a multiple of 5. 11, neither of both. Fizz, you can say it is for 12. That is only a multiple of 3. 13, 14, as usual, neither multiple of both 3 and 5. But when it comes to 15 itself, then its output should be Fizzbuzz instead of just fizz or just buzz or the number, because it is multiple of both 3 and 5. 15 is a multiple of both. So what can be the approach to solve this problem given any n? N can be in the range from 1 till 10 raised power 5 or 6, whatever it is. So n can be very large also. Obviously, one thing which is most probably coming to everyone's mind is we have to do iteration. We have to run a loop over each of the numbers starting from 1 going till n and increment by 1, 1, 1 at a time. That is, start the loop from 1, iterator maybe, or a counter maybe, starting from 1, incrementing 1 by 1, that is going to 2, 3, 4, and so on up till n. The last number should be n. But based on certain conditions, based on certain criteria, we will have to check whether the number is a multiple of 3 or 5 or both. And according to that, we have to print accordingly, or you can say we have to output the number or return the number accordingly, return the string accordingly. So what can be one of the approaches to solve this problem? One of the approaches will be just do whatever it is asked. That is, we will run a loop over each of the numbers. So let's say we are starting the loop from 1. We will check, is 1 only a multiple of 3, only a multiple of 5, multiple of both, or neither? So how can you check whether the number is a multiple of some other number? If it comes in that table, on dividing the number by whatever you want to test it with, if you will divide it by that number, the remainder should come out to be 0. Let's say if I am saying that 12 is a multiple of 3. What do you mean by that? It means when you will divide 12 by 3, the remainder will come out to be 0. That is 12 modulus 3. Modulus is the remainder operator or modulo operator. It should come out to be 0 value because the remainder is 0. It is completely able to divide 12. So 12 is a multiple of 3 or 3 is a divisor of 12. So what I have to check is 1 a multiple of 3? 1 is not a multiple of 3. What about multiple of 5? Is 1 a multiple of 5? That is 1 modulus 5 equal to 0? No, it is not equal to 0. Since both of these values are not equal to 0, 1 should be printed as it is. So what we can do is we can have a condition where if the number modulus 3 is also not equal to 0, as well as number modulus 5 is also not equal to 0, print the number itself. Similarly, you will do for 2. Why will you do it for 2 in the same fashion as 2 modulus 3 is also not equal to 0, as well as 2 modulus 5 is also not equal to 0. So similar as the before, that is similar as 1. You will print the number itself. But when it comes to the number 3, what about 3? The number 3, modulus 3 will come out to be 0. That is, it is a multiple of 3. But what about the number 5? Is it a multiple of 5? No. So those numbers who are only multiple of 3 should be printed as a fizz. And if, let's say, if it is a multiple of both 3 and 5, in that case, it should not be only fizz. It should be actually Fizzbuzz. So in case of 3, we are printing fizz. Similarly, you will say for 6, you will say for 9, you will say for 12, the same output will be there. And let me just write only one time for these particular numbers. So for these particular numbers, like let's say instead of x, instead of 2 or 1, I'm writing x right now. It can be generic, anything. So what is the condition? We will say when we have to print the number itself, that is in the scenario, in the condition when the number is not a multiple of 3 as well as not a multiple of 5. So examples will be 1, 2, 4, and let's say 7, and so on. And the second scenario which we discussed is if the number is only getting divided by 3, not getting divided by 5, let's say x is the number, so you will have to print fizz. What about the numbers which are multiple of 5, that is 5, 10, and so on? In that case, what you will do is you will check the divisibility by 3. Obviously, it will come out to be not equal to 0 because we don't have to print only buzz in case of multiples of both 3 and 5. So it should not be a multiple of 3, but it should be a multiple of 5. That is, the division by 5 will give you 0. In this case, it is not equal to 0. In this case, it is equal to 0. And the output will be buzz. That is for 5, only multiple of 5, buzz. 10, only multiple of 5, buzz. But when it comes to numbers like 15, 30, and so on, you have two types of conditions which you can write. One smart condition is just check whether x modulus 15 is equal to 0 or not. Because if a number is a multiple of both 3 and 5, obviously it will be multiple of 15. It is bound to happen. Or what you can do is you can just go in the same fashion. That is, x modulus 3 is equals to 0. It is a multiple of 3, as well as x modulus 5 is equals to 0. It is also a multiple of 5. If it is multiple of both, then you will have to print the Fizzbuzz. So let's just say in this case we will print Fizzbuzz. So these will be the 4 if else conditions, or you can say a if else if ladder will be required, and accordingly we will print inside a loop. What will be the time complexity of this approach? Time complexity is obviously the best. You can't do further better in the terms of time complexity. You will have to run a loop over each number from 1 to n, and writing this if else will be constant operation. So overall time will be linear, where n is the number which is given to you as an input. What about space? We are actually not requiring any extra space, because if we will consider the output return type, which is a string array, we never consider the input data structures as well as the output data structures in extra space. When we say space, it generally means only the extra space complexity, the auxiliary data structures which you are creating, which in this question will be nothing. You will just require a loop having a single variable, a iterator from 1 to n. So 4 bytes, that's it. So linear time, constant space. But the point is, can you better do than the first approach which we have discussed? Answer is not in terms of time and space complexity. This is the best one. But in terms of the atomic operations, or in terms of the operations time complexity, what we are doing right now is we are doing modulus operations, or you can say the AND operators every time. And these operators will be a little bit more time taking than maybe incrementing a number or maybe decrementing a number. So a slightly better algorithm, which some of the interviewers might expect, it is not like all of the interviewers will expect, but some of the interviewers will expect a better solution will be to not use the modulus operator, to not use the division operator, to not use the AND operator. And in such a scenario, what you have to do is for each of the tracking purpose, whether the number is a multiple of 3, whether the number is multiple of 5, you will have to maintain a count variable. That is, what is the current state for the third number? That is, every third number should be a multiple of 3, 3, 6, 9, and so on. Every fifth number will be a multiple of 5. So we will track a count for the multiple of 3 and for the multiple of 5. As soon as the counter reaches 3, 3, 3, we will say that yes, the number is a multiple of 3. Why? Because we will make the count from 1, go to 2, go to 3 and then again come back to 1. Go to 2, go to 3, again come back to 1, or you can say again come back to 0 if we are starting with 0. So in that fashion, we will be able to maintain the count and just compare count is equals to 3 or not. Similarly for 5, we will start the count with 1 for the 5 variable, and we will say as soon as the count reaches 5, that is the point when the output will be buzz. And when you can say the count reaches both, for the first count reaches 3 and the second variable's count reaches 5, then we have to print Fizzbuzz. So let's quickly do a dry run for the second approach, a slightly better approach, which some intervals will expect. Initially, count of 3 variable. Let's say the variable names are count 3 and count 5. You can name the variables anything as you want. Initially, I am saying both are starting with 0. Now, first number 1 will be there. Obviously, loop will be same. Nothing is going to change in terms of the for loop or in some terms of the while loop which you are going to use. So as soon as you enter the for loop, first thing you should do is you should increment both the numbers, the count of 3 and the count of 5. Now check. Is a count of 3 equal to 3? No, it is not equal to 3. How about count of 5 equal to 5? No, it is not equal to 5. So print the number as it is. No need to change anything. What about 2? Since first you will increment the count for 3 variable, increment the count for 5 variable. This is not equal to 3 because it is not a multiple of 3. This is not equal to 5 because the number 2 is not a multiple of 5. So print the number as it is. But what about the number 3? First, as soon as you are entering the for loop, what is the point which you are doing is incrementing both the variables because they are maintaining the count. And now if you will see that 3 is equals to 3, it means the every third number should be a multiple of 3. So this is the first, you can say, multiple of 3 which is going to be there. And in that scenario, what we have to print is only Fizz. Why? Because this number is not equal to 5. When both are equal to 5, then you have to print Fizzbuzz. Right now it is only Fizz. Then what about 4? You will say before going to 4, what you have to do is again make this variable become back to 0. Otherwise, you can't track that count should be equal to 3 or 6 or 9. You will have to again start the counting or again start the tracker from 0 as soon as it reaches 3 in the first case, as soon as it reaches 5 in the second case. So what you will do is while going inside the function, count for 3 variable increment by 1, count for 4 variable increment by 1. Is it equal to 3? No, this is not equal to 3. Is it equal to 5? No, this is not equal to 5. So 4 is not a multiple of both 3 and 5. So print 4 as it is. But as soon as you will go to 5, what will happen is you will see that this number is only 2. It is not equal to 3. It is not a multiple of 3. It is not every third number. After 3, the next multiple of 3 will be 6. But when we increment the count for 5, yes, now it is equals to 5. And if it is equals to 5, you will have to print only buzz because only the number is a multiple of 5, not both 3 and 5. But when you will repeat this process again and again, first of course, what you have to do, since the count of 5 is equals to 5, again set it to 0. But don't set the count of 3 to 0. This process will go on one by one for each number. I'm directly skipping to the number which is going to be 15. In case of 15, what will you see is after incrementing, both the count of 3 will be equal to 3 and the count of 5 will be equivalent to 5. And in such a scenario, what you have to check is a count of 3 equal to 3 as well as count of 5 is equals to 5. You will have to print both Fizzbuzz. Or maybe instead of doing like AND operator, what you can do is you can provide a if condition instead of if else. Because if you will just provide two ifs, it is going to be executed one after the other. Even if both conditions are true, both will get executed. So let's do what? Let's now discuss the instruction manual. Although in the instruction manual, I will be using AND operators, but without the use of modulus operator or without the use of division, because addition or subtraction is lesser time consuming in terms of atomic operations than the division or multiplication. So what we have to do is we have to first of all create an array of outputs, and that too array of strings. So create a array of strings containing what? Containing initially empty strings or null, whatever you want. Of size what? So let's not write containing something. Let's just say create array of strings of size n, irrespective of whatever it will contain initially, it will anyways get updated. Create two tracker variables. Create two counters. One will be count of 3 and count of 5, both set as 0 initially. Both will be initialized with 0 variable. And now is the point when we are starting the for loop. So let's write a for loop. What we will be doing is run a loop or run a iteration over all the elements over elements 1 till n using a loop incrementing by 1 at a time. I'm not writing that much description. I hope it is self-understood. What we have to do every time is we have to check what is the number of count of 3 and count of 5. So first condition is if let's say the count of 3 is equals to 3 equals 3 as well as count of 5 equals 5. And when we say as well as, it is nothing but the AND operator. Only one times AND operator will be used instead of 4 times using it. So if it is a multiple of both 3 and 5, we have to do what? We have to print, or you can say add the output as the Fizzbuzz for the current index, for the current element. But if let's say it is not multiple of both 3 and 5, in that scenario, what we have to do is, if let's say it is only a multiple of 3, not a multiple of 5. So if it is only count of 3 equals to 3, add the output as only fizz, not Fizzbuzz for the current element. However, if vice versa, that is, it is only a multiple of 5, else if count of 5 is only equals to 5, only add buzz, not fizz or not Fizzbuzz both. Add the output as buzz for the current element. And finally, what we will say is, if let's say it is not both multiples of 3 and 5, neither of them, then we have to add the element itself. Then add the element itself in the output array, in the output. But we have to make sure that we are updating these two variables of count 3 and count 5. How do we have to do it? First, what we have to do is, as soon as we enter the loop, increment both count 3 and count 5 by +1. That is count 3 getting incremented by 1, count 5 getting incremented by 1. However, let's say if count 3 reaches 3, then what we have to do is, we have to make it back to 0. But in this case, since count 5 is also equal to 5, we have to make the count 5 also set back to 0. In this scenario, only count 3 should be set back to 0. And similarly, in this scenario, only count 5 should be set back to 0. However, in the last scenario, when neither of them is equal to 3 or 5, then we don't have to set them back to 0. Only resetting will happen once we are able to reach every third number for count 3, every fifth number for count 5. So this entire code is the better code in terms of the atomic operations which we are using that are not division or modulus, but we are using some count based approach, which is still linear time complexity, still constant space complexity, but a good solution for an interview. We will be writing the code for the problem Fizzbuzz in Java programming language. So what we have to do in this problem is create an array of strings because the output will be containing either the numbers or fizz or buzz or both fizz buzz. So that's why we require an array of strings. Of what size? Of the same size as the n variable which we are getting in the input. So initially this string array will be containing null values. However, we don't care because we will be updating the values. So string array of n size, initially each index will be having null. Now that we discussed in the optimized solution or in a different way of writing the code using the counter based approach, that we have to create two variables, two counters, one for count of 3 and one for count of 5, both initially starting from 0. If you have not watched the first video, please watch that, otherwise this approach will not be clear to you. What we have to do in the code is run a for loop, preferably over all the elements from 1 till n, so that we can check whether the element should be printed or fizz or buzz or fizz buzz both. So first, of course, as soon as we enter the for loop, we have to update both the count 3 as well as count 5 variables because we are starting them from 0, 0. So we have to make the count go like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for count 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this for count 5 variable. That's why we, as soon as we enter the for loop, we will increment both of them by 1. Now check whether both the count 3 and count 5 are 3 and 5 respectively. That is, if both the values are equals to 3 and 5, it means that the number is a multiple of both 3 and 5, or you can say it is a multiple of 15. And in such a scenario, what we have to do is we have to first reset both the variables back to 0. But after resetting, obviously, we have to print the output as Fizzbuzz. So at the same index of the output, or you can say this resultant, let's say this array name is res. I will say at the same index, we will put actually not index because index will start from 1 and it will go to n. We have to put it at index minus 1. Or if your language supports a dynamic array, then you can also create a dynamic array. However, in Java, since the return type is a static array of fixed size, I have to use indices. So resultant of previous index. For value 1, we will put the answer at 0th index. For value 2, we will put the element at or the answer at first index and so on. That is resultant of index minus 1 will be equivalent to Fizzbuzz. Fizzbuzz, and just make sure that F and B of Fizzbuzz are capital, otherwise answer will be wrong. However, if it is only the counter 3 is equivalent to 3, it means that the number is only a multiple of 3, not a multiple of 5. That is 3, 6, 9, and so on. In such a scenario, obviously count of 3 should be reset, that is make it back to 0. But now in this scenario, we will only print fizz, not Fizzbuzz. So I will just remove buzz from this. Similarly, what you have to do is no brownie points for guessing this. That is, if the count is 5, then obviously it is a multiple of 5, not a multiple of 3, because if it is multiple of both, it is already handled. Now we are writing else conditions, that is a ladder. So either this will be there, or it will be like this, or it will be like this. It will not be multiple conditions being true. If it is a multiple of 5, reset the count of 5 back to 0 and add the output as only buzz, not Fizzbuzz, because it is only multiple of 5. However, if the number is not a multiple of 3, not a multiple of 5, it is not a multiple of any one of them. In that scenario, what we have to do is resultant of index minus 1 will be the number itself, that is index. But since this array is a type of string and this index variable is an integer, in order to store integer into a string, what we have to do is either add a string which is empty into this index, that is empty string, plus the number will come out to be a string. If I write it in the form of, let's say there is a string which is empty, let's say there is a number which is 16. What will happen is after adding both of them, it will come out to be 16 as a string, because string concatenated with integer is going to give you string only, not a integer. So this is one smart way or one trick to convert a integer into a string. Or maybe what you can use is some inbuilt function like integer.parseInt, or actually not integer.parseInt, but something like string.value of some function will be there. I do not remember exactly. That's why it is better to use, instead of inbuilt functions, these kind of tricks which will not help, or which will not basically take help of any inbuilt functions. So now that we are done with the code, let's actually do what? Let's actually finally return the output. So return the output array, that is nothing but resultant array. If we will run this, then hopefully our output should be same for 15, that is 1, 2, fizz, 4, fizz, buzz, fizz, and so on. Let's see if it is going to give me the same or not. It's taking some time to run because there might be some issues in terms of the variable name. So the variable name is not capital N, but it is small n. Let's run it again after doing the corrections. Small mistake in the naming of the variable. Still, there is some issue in the index plus plus, not I plus plus, because the index variable is what we have initialized as IDX. Hopefully it should be correct now after doing the corrections. As you can see, for 15, it is having the same output as expected output. Let's just do what? Let's just submit the code and see if it is going to work for all the scenarios. However, in 15, N as 15, all the scenarios got automatically covered. Fizz, fizz buzz, only buzz, and the number. But still, you can see that all the test cases after submission are also are getting passed. So the time complexity of this particular code will be linear because we are running a loop over all the n indices or over all the n elements from 1 to n. And inside that for loop, we are just doing a lot of if else conditions, which are constant operations. So overall time will be linear. What about space? Although there is an array which is being created, but this array is what we are going to return. It is not an extra space. When we count the space complexity, or when we figure out the space complexity, we don't include, generally include the input and the output. We only talk about extra space or auxiliary data structures. So the space complexity for this particular code is going to be constant in nature. Linear time, constant space is the solution for Fizzbuzz problem, which we did without doing any division or modulus, which is a very good interview question.